Everyone for coming. So my name is Liam O'Brien and I'm the principal investigator of the Human Building Interaction Lab. I'm also a prof in civil and environmental engineering. And most of my research looks at behavior, but from a very engineering perspective. But we're a group of about 10 grad students and me. I have psychologists, architects, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, etc. So a nice broad group. And behavior is kind of what I'm into, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Not nearly as philosophical as the last talk. So I thought it would be interesting to look at some stats for Carleton, and unfortunately Philip had the same stats because he provided me with them. But what I think is important about all these stats is that we put it in context, so I tried to make it a little bit more tangible. So this is not tangible, so that's 177 million kilowatt hours equivalent per year. But it works out to, for every person on campus, 6,600 kilowatt hours. Again, I don't think that's very tangible. But every Canadian uses an average of just over 10,000 kilowatt hours for housing. So a lot of us don't live here, and we just come on campus for 8 hours, maybe 10 hours a day, and we're using 2/3 as much as we use at home, which I find absolutely shocking. Because at home we have a lot more space per person. We're cooking, we're showering, etc. So I found that pretty shocking. The other surprising one is campus uses $1.3 million worth of domestic water per year. Probably the domestic just means it excludes steam. It's used for distributing heating. Anyway, kind of a lame comparison, but that's 180 swimming pool fills worth of water. Or 900 toilet flushes per year per person. So I thought that was a lot too, but then you think like I'm on campus for 250 days a year, 4 toilet flushes a day, pretty believable actually. But what I thought was really shocking is that if you normalize this by the number of full-time students on campus, which is around 25,000, it's $540, which is like a good chunk of your tuition. That's a month's rent, or I would say for most of us. So that's pretty shocking. So I wanted to talk a little bit about behavior and kind of this how distant water use and energy use is when you're on campus, in the context of something called tragedy of the commons. If you look at the breakdown of Canadian energy use in commercial buildings, I think a lot of people find that these topics or these items are very obscure. Like space heating, I don't really have any control over that. That's 50%. This isn't for Carleton, it's for the average institutional commercial building. And then lighting's pretty big, but I think it's hugely overemphasized because that's one of the few things we have control over when we're in an institutional building is the light switch. I suspect at Carleton, the auxiliary equipment, which includes printers and computers, is way higher than this. But what I wanted to say is that we actually do have a lot of control over these things. So for space heating, I mean, maybe not you as students per se, but things like thermostat use, opening windows, leaving windows open in the middle of winter, it happens all the time. But probably more on the lighting and computer use. So I wanted to run a little thought experiment, think, what's the cost to an individual if they use 1 kilowatt hour of electricity? So let's say leaving on a desktop computer for 6 hours instead of turning it off. The answer is about that much. Which is, and before you think I'm crazy, if I use 1 extra kilowatt hour, that cost will get spread out over 25,000 or 30,000 people. So it's really, really insignificant. So you can see why I wouldn't care. Because at the end of the day, Duncan Watt, the VP of Finance, might have to raise tuition a little bit more or whatever. But if you look at the cost of the university, it's, well, a heck of a lot more than that, 25,000 times more. So this is tragedy of the commons, the idea that you can use, sorry, I lost my train of thought, long day. But the fact that you can use lots of resources and it doesn't really impact you. In fact, I think we have this notion of hoarding, like back to our ancestral days, where, if you hoard food or whatever now, then if there's a long drought, you'll live longer than everyone else. Kind of like a buffet. So I like to use this analogy for our behavior and our design. And I think it sounds pessimistic, but it's probably realistic. So I do a lot of building design and that sort of thing. And I think what a lot of architects and engineers do is they assume that people are going to follow this path that they expect, so they go all the way around the curve. What we know people really do is they just cut across. And this is analogous, of course, because what it represents is that people take the easiest path, and it's very hard to get people to change their behavior. And what do policymakers do? They just put a fence across, and then people walk around. And in all honesty, I ripped this picture off. It used to be about software piracy, but I think it's safe to say that they block software piracy and then people find a way around it. Same thing with energy-related behavior. We're really creative at using lots of energy. So what I'm about to propose is that we give a lure for people to go around the long way, and in this case, save a little bit of energy. So I just wanted to go over very, very quickly a study that my PhD student performed. So we know that if you charge people heat and electricity in their apartment, they use about 30% less on average, which I think is absolutely shocking. Sometimes I've had the notion that people don't know how to save energy because it's so distant and remote, and it's just like we don't feel like we have control. But with that stat, I think that suggests that people are actually pretty good at saving energy. It's just that if they don't have the incentive, then they're less likely to. So what we did in this study is we studied a lot of Ottawa apartments, 40 Ottawa apartments, 20 where people paid for their heating, 20 where they didn't. And we stuck these little sensors, just like credit card size, and it measures temperature, and it logs it for a year. So really nifty thing, and it's $20. It's meant to be shipped with like fish or something, and then you can see what temperatures it went over for its entire trip from water to your plate. But what we found is that, not surprisingly, the people that pay for their heating, they're a lot more efficient, so they keep the set point way lower. Not only do they keep it lower, but they're a lot more diligent about turning down the heat when they're gone. So the bulk metered people, these are the people that don't pay. Their temperature only fluctuated by about 1 degree every day. For the people that pay for their heating, it fluctuates by about 3 degrees. So that tells us if people are responsible for their heating, they're a lot more careful and sensible about where they put their thermostat. We also asked them what they wear and everything. And one of the most interesting things is that the people that pay for their heating were wearing as much as physically comfortable, or so they claimed. The people that don't pay for the heating, well, they do things like sleep naked. It's comfortable. I don't blame them. So my proposal, and this is a bit out there, but it's more just to make a point. Who knows, maybe. But what I was thinking is that you as a student, or more important, employees who have potentially their own office, their own cubicle, should walk around with something like this. And before they can plug in anything, they need to put that thing in. It's like a key. But that's not just a key, it also counts how many kilowatt hours or whatever they use. And then at the end of the month, they pay for that, or probably better yet, they buy advanced credit, just like a prepaid phone. And then if their credit runs out, electricity gets cut out. So just like with the sub-metering thing, there's a lot of outrage when this happens because people don't want to be told that suddenly they have to pay for something that they took for granted. But the people that love it are the people that always were conservative just because they're good people, and then suddenly they're told everyone else is going to have to pay for their bad habits and you're going to get rewarded. So what we could do here in Carleton is we keep the average cost per person constant. You'd probably, tuition would be dropped by your $540 or whatever it was. But with that, you use no electricity. As you use more electricity, you go above that 500. If you're very wasteful, then you might be paying $1,000 or $2,000 a year. That's just my concept. Thank you.